I'm ready to make another thing. And recently I've been in a Gravity Falls mood. I made this nice dipper hat, but I feel like I should make something more. In fact, I want to make the Mystery Shack. It's pretty cool, it's pretty big, and I think I want it. However, due to the fact that I don't have available land or lumber to build a shack of full size, I'm going to have to make a model shack. Hopefully one much better than this example that I have. The Mystery Shack consists of a few key parts: the foundation, the roof, the signs, the walls, which include doors, windows, and some more signs, and other various accoutrements.
It's perfect.
The first thing I need to make is the foundation. It's got this big rectangle and then like a smaller rectangle, so I'm gonna try and make that. Now, one thing that I'm glad about is that the Mystery Shack isn't like a pristine little shack. It's a little ramshackle, so I can make it look a little messy, and that'll be fine, but I do want to make it as clean as possible. And the messy parts are definitely all intentional. Then I go ahead and cut that out. And now I can move on to the walls. I can't go chopping wood and making logs, so instead I'm going to use straws. I spent a little while sizing them out, marking them up, cutting them to the right size, and marking off where the porches will be. Until I had all the right size straws and all the markings set out. I glued the straws together to make neat little walls. And then using a little card I folded in half to make a little triangle, I started gluing the walls to the foundation. It was here I realized that I completely forgot the back porch. I also forgot many other things throughout the course of this video, but this is just the first. I decided to make the front walls of each side of the shack flat pieces of cardboard because they kind of look more like that than logs in the show and images I could find. I also realized that I forgot to cut windows into the logs, and I forget a couple more times to put the windows in, but they all end up in. Right here I put a top bar in for further support. And here I put the little logs around the door. Now, as much as I like the candy sort of aesthetic that this is giving. I do want it to look like the Mystery Shack, so I went ahead and primed it. After priming, it was time for the first coat of paint to make it look like a log cabin. This was not the last coat of paint, and don't get attached to however the logs look or the wood texture or whatever, because it changes repeatedly throughout the video. The next thing I decided to work on was the foundation. The first part of the foundation is these little wood stilts that the Mystery Shack is on for some reason. Along with those, there are also 2 sets of stairs made of wood going up to the porches. After the stilts were done, I decided to start working on the shingles, which I laser cut out of paper. And then after sizing out a roof-shaped piece of paper, I meticulously coated the roof-shaped piece of paper with shingle-shaped strips of paper. After properly applying the shingles to the roof, I glued the roof to the shack. For some reason, I was greatly dissatisfied with the quality of this, so I did it again. After applying the roofing to a acceptable degree, including adding the little support poles on the outside here, I realized that there's supposed to be an extra thing here on the roof. This little thing on the roof, along with other areas of the shack, have windows. So, from a clear piece of plastic, I made smaller clear pieces of plastic that were window-shaped to put on my shack. I used markers to add little designs on the windows, including the stained glass window. And after that, I decided to finally finish the foundation. Using a lump of clay, I molded on top of my extra tile I use for things that I don't want to make my desk dirty with. I eventually formed a foundation-shaped shape of clay. which I was able to make look like a foundation through various washes and dry brushes. I then attach the foundation to the place where the foundation needs to be, leaving me with something that really closely resembled a blank mystery shack. However, it didn't look good enough because I forgot a tiny but really annoying detail. On the back side of the mystery shack, I was able to find a shot where it shows a tiny little door sticking out. So I had to add it. Thankfully, this can be done with just a little bit of really painful cutting. And a kind of bad transition. Now I had to make the porches, and this really stumped me for a while, because I had to make green shingles that were all really strangely shaped for tiny little shapes that I have to make a bunch of. My first idea was just to fold up a piece of paper like this, but I eventually went ahead and made all of the shingles separately. I added a little support structure for the porch. And started gluing the shingles on. But then I didn't like how they looked, so I took them all off, put them back on, didn't like how they looked again, took them off, and then put them on in a different pattern. The new pattern included putting some of them upside down and some of them right side up to more mimic the real way that you would put these shingles on a house. I didn't want it to look see-through, and there was a lot of gaps on the other shingling patterns. On the back porch of the shack, there's this really weird normal shingle overlay before the green shingles, so I quickly added those on. Before putting the green shingles on in the original way I tried putting them on the other porch. That's because I thought the back porch looked a little more messy in the pictures, so I decided to go with the more messy shingling method. After shingling, I decided I didn't like the color of the shack, so I changed it. And I continued to change it throughout the course of this video, so this is the only time I'm going to show the repainting of the shack. At this point, my working desk was getting a little messy, but as you can tell from my plan, I still had a long ways to go. I also forgot another window. At this point, it was time to make the big Mystery Shack sign. A large tongue depressor seemed to be a good size for the sign, so I started trimming it up and cutting it up for the sign. Then I just needed to add the lettering for the big signs, which the one that said mystery was a whole lot easier than the one that said shack. So instead of doing the shack part right away, I decided to work on all of the other smaller signs. All of the wooden signs look a little yellowish, so I used a little yellow paint to sort of dye them to the right shade. Finally, I went ahead and made the letters for the shack sign. The letters were painted red before it was time to glue all the signs that I had just made onto the shack. Originally, I did put the S on the wrong way, but I flipped it later. Off camera, I added a little nail that I painted to make this sort of three-sectional steam smoke pipe thingy that the shack has, but there's still a little cone I had to make for the top. But my desk was dirty, so I went ahead and made it on the floor. I roughened up the little cone and gave it a little bit of a black paint to make it look like the rest of the nail. Before moving on to the other props of the mystery shack, starting with the mystery wind vane thingy. This little thingy, though small and intricate, is also very iconic, so I had to make it right, otherwise I would be dissatisfied. The letters WHAT were particularly annoying because I decided to make them out of this scrap material from my 3D printer and hot glue, which plastic that is designed to be easily melted should not be used with glue that is hot enough to melt plastic. I then made the chimney out of foam using my hot wire. I painted the chimney to look like a chimney, and I added appropriate chimney shapes to the chimney. Until it looked like a nice chimney, and I put it on the spot that the chimney was supposed to go. After doing some touch-ups with paint, and adding a tiny little megaphone, and 2 tiny little lights for the sign, it was time for the moss. And I didn't know what to do with the moss, and I didn't want to try making my own moss, so I just bought some. I don't usually buy stuff for the stuff I make, so I'm going to need to figure out how to use the rest of this. The moss did turn out quite well for the shack, so it was a purchase well made. After the moss, I added the final sign that goes on the very front of the shack. And then I made all the various little thingies that go around the shack, such as a vending machine and coolers, before finishing the various furnished areas of the shack. With the furniture done, the shack was done. And might I say, it looks very nice.